Hi, Andrew from Sachs. Did you know that there's a relationship between how smart somebody is and whether they're likely to behave well or badly at work? This is something that's been demonstrated in research for decades now, and I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about it. But first, how many bad behaviours happen in the workplace on average? This slide shows you intentional impoliteness to other people, and this is based on thousands of people across Australia and New Zealand. We asked them the question of how regularly are you intentionally impolite to other people at work? Thousands of people across Australia and New Zealand who filled in a questionnaire where they were asked, how often are you intentionally impolite to other people at work? And what you see is that about only 0.3% do it extremely frequently. You see about 0.8% do it frequently, so 1.2%, about 1 in 100, are kind of nasty in a habitual sort of a style, and sometimes it's about 14.3% of the population, so about 15.5% of the population are relatively regularly, intentionally impolite to other people at work. Frankly, I don't feel great about that. That's quite a large proportion when you think of getting close to 1 in 5 people around you acting in this way. How about a more passive form of nastiness, ignoring, snubbing, excluding other people? And what you find here is that about 5.3% of people frequently or extremely frequently do this. Now, when this becomes severe enough, this becomes a thing called bullying by exclusion. And exclusion is a very negative thing for human beings. Human beings are social primates. We feel bad if we're not included, and we feel alienated and isolated if that's the case. So it's a negative behaviour. But what has this got to do with how smart people are? Well, it's been shown that negative behaviour and intelligence correlate. And in general, the story is the smarter people are, the less bad stuff that they do. The less smart they are, the more likely they are to do bad stuff. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that there is a very strong correlation between cognitive ability and self-regulation. When people are smarter, they tend to be more able to manage their response to their own emotions. So if a person's not very smart and they're angry, well, they might do something which might prove ultimately to be ill-advised. A smarter person may well find other options of what to do about this. But let's look at the evidence. So prisoners, this is the fascinating work of Bree Diamond, who undertook this work as part of a PhD thesis and has continued to work in this area since. But what was demonstrated here is that prisoners with lower IQ perpetrate markedly more violence than those with higher IQ. So, fascinating study. What happened is that Bree Diamond was able to get data on the cognitive ability, the IQ scores, how smart people are, from prisoners in the United States of America. If you're thinking of going to jail in the States, you may well find that on the way in they psych test you. In some states they do this. So Bree Diamond was able to get this data, and she found that purely by randomness, certain cell blocks had higher or medium or lower IQ. And then she got the data on violence in those cell blocks. Guess what? The high IQ cell blocks had lower levels of violence. The low IQ cell blocks had much higher levels of violence. Therefore, confirming the hypothesis that there's a relationship between cognitive ability and violence. In general work populations, there's been found to be a strong relationship between cognitive ability or IQ or smartness and negative behaviours. So you see the correlation here is 0.35. Well, what is 0.35? Well, that's pretty much as good as you're going to get out of an interview. Even the best interviews don't get much further than about 0.5. So your average interview is around about 0.35 accuracy. What this means is that the smarter somebody is, the less likely it is that they will actually do bad things. Now, these bad things in organisations come in two forms. Interpersonal, which means I do bad things to my colleagues or my customers or whomever, and the second is organisational. And in organisational bad stuff, it's things like theft, ignoring our policies, those kinds of things. Did you know that cognitive ability, smartness, has historically been rising across the Western world and elsewhere for that matter? This is a thing called the Flynn effect because it was discovered by a fellow by the name of Flynn. Now, the Flynn effect shows us that over years, organisations that test cognitive ability, how smart people are, have had to continually increase their norms, which means if you're going to be considered to be exceptional today in terms of cognitive ability, you've got to be way higher than you would have had to be, let's say, 100 years ago. That's the Flynn effect. The interesting thing about it is that as the Flynn effect has happened, rates of violence across the world have declined. Yes, I know the press tells you that rates of violence are increasing. Total nonsense. If you're interested in this, read the book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, and you'll see that he has comprehensive evidence that rates of violence are way lower now than they ever have been. Now, he posits a range of theories as to why this is the case, but one of them is the Flynn effect. As people have got smarter, they just simply do less bad stuff. What about workforces? Here you see a relationship between cognitive ability, IQ, and remuneration. You see this very strong 45-degree line. And what that means is that there's a strong relationship between cognitive ability and how much money you earn. Now, of course, there are geniuses that don't earn much money, and yes, there are people who are not very smart who earn a lot of money, but in general, if you measure thousands and thousands of people, you will get this strong correlation where people who earn more money tend to be smarter. What that means, though, is that if you get large workforces which are lowly paid, you have to assume that they're going to have a lower cognitive ability than average for the population. And that explains why sometimes we get rather negative behaviours in lowly paid workforces. Partially, what's going on there is the lower cognitive ability, which tends to correlate with negative behaviours anyway. You're seeing that effect in large workforces, which are relatively lowly paid because you've got the low cognitive ability component there. So, what does all this mean? Recruit smart people if you want positive behaviours and less negative behaviours. And if you're interested in finding out how to do so, click on the link near this video and we'll explain to you how all of that works, and we'll give you a free trial so you get a chance to measure this and other important things like personality and values. Thanks for watching.